This is insane. SpaceX just called their most explosive failure their greatest success ever. 33 engines roaring, perfect liftoff, everything going flawlessly. Then, catastrophic destruction at 1,400 degrees, the rocket melting, tumbling helplessly into the ocean. But here's what blew my mind. SpaceX planned this disaster. They wanted it to explode. And the reason why changes everything we know about reaching Mars. What they discovered in those final moments will shock you. Let's dive right in. So what exactly happened in those crucial 47 minutes? Picture this. 33 Raptor engines. That's more raw power than anything humanity has ever built, all firing in perfect harmony. The ground literally shook beneath Boca Chica. This 400-foot monster lifted off flawlessly. But here's where it gets weird. Every single engine worked. 33 out of 33. That's like flipping a coin 33 times and getting heads every time. The odds, 1 in 8 billion. Yet somehow, this doomed mission achieved what previous flights couldn't. Why would SpaceX celebrate perfection when they planned for destruction? 2 minutes in, something extraordinary happened. Hot staging. The most dangerous maneuver in rocketry. It's like trying to separate two cars welded together at 1,000 miles per hour, while both engines are still running full blast. Most rocket companies consider this suicide. SpaceX calls it essential. The upper stage ignites while still attached to the booster, creating a controlled explosion that would vaporize lesser rockets. But Starship pulled it off flawlessly at T+252. The booster flipped away like a graceful dancer. 6 engines roared to life on Starship itself. Everything was going too well. That's when SpaceX's real plan kicked in. Here's what nobody expected. SpaceX never intended to save that booster. While everyone watched for a landing, engineers were secretly pushing it to its absolute limits. They cranked up the re-entry angle, maxed out the aerodynamic forces, and basically asked, how much punishment can this thing take? The booster screamed back toward Earth at angles no sane engineer would attempt. Telemetry flooded in. Precious data about metal fatigue, heat distribution, control authority under extreme stress. Then, at T+543, it happened. Contact lost. Booster destroyed. Mission Control didn't panic. They celebrated. Because that booster just gave them the blueprint for Mars. But Starship kept climbing. At T+918, something strange happened. The payload bay door, designed to deploy satellites worth billions, refused to open. I'm sorry, Dan. I can't do that. The eerily calm voice from Mission Control sent chills down my spine. A simple mechanical failure? Or something more sinister? The door mechanism had worked perfectly in ground tests, but space doesn't follow Earth's rules. The vacuum, the temperature swings, the radiation, they all conspire against human engineering. What if this failure revealed a fatal flaw that could doom future Mars missions? 10 minutes into flight, disaster struck for real. Starship began to spin, slowly at first and then faster. Like a figure skater pulling in their arms, the massive vehicle started an uncontrolled rotation that would seal its fate. Without attitude control, the planned engine relight was impossible. No relight meant no orbit. No orbit meant no Mars capability testing. The mission was officially failing by every traditional metric. But SpaceX kept filming. The Starlink terminals stayed online, streaming live footage as their own spacecraft spiraled toward destruction. Why? Because they knew something the world didn't. This failure was about to become their greatest teacher. 42 minutes in, the light show began. Starship hit the atmosphere at 17,000 miles per hour, a speed that turns air into plasma and metal into fire. Temperatures spiked to 1,400 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt copper. The heat shield flaps, designed to steer the vehicle through re-entry, began to glow like molten steel. One flap started disintegrating, on camera. Plasma engulfed the vehicle in a cocoon of superheated gas. Gas that would kill any human, instantly. This was the moment SpaceX had been waiting for. Every second of footage, every temperature reading, every structural failure was pure gold. No simulation on Earth can replicate what happens when a spacecraft tumbles uncontrolled through re-entry. But Starship was giving them a masterclass in destruction. As the vehicle tore itself apart, engineers in Hawthorne were furiously taking notes. How long did the heat shield last? Which materials failed first? At what temperature did the control surfaces lose effectiveness? These weren't academic questions. They were life or death intel for Mars missions. Because when you're 140 million miles from Earth, there's no rescue mission coming. Every system has to work perfectly, or everyone dies. Starship Flight 9 just handed SpaceX a catalog of failure modes they could never have discovered any other way. The vehicle's death was teaching them how to keep future crews alive. But here's where it gets controversial. Some critics say SpaceX is reckless, that they're learning through destruction instead of careful engineering. Why not simulate everything first, they ask. The answer is simple. You can't simulate the unknown. Mars re-entry will be different from Earth. The atmosphere is thinner, the gravity weaker, the distance from help infinite. Every Earth test flight brings them closer to cracking the Mars code. But is it worth the risk? But the real story starts here. At T+106, Starship approached max Q, the point where aerodynamic forces hit their absolute peak. This is where most rockets, if they're going to fail, actually fail. The dynamic pressure at max Q is like being crushed by an invisible hand. Moving at Mach 2.5, through air so thick it becomes a solid wall. But all 33 engines kept firing. Chamber pressures stable across every single Raptor. Not one hiccup, not one anomaly. This level of perfection was almost suspicious. Engineers had been working for months on engine reliability. After Flight 8's engine out scenarios, they rebuilt entire systems from scratch. New ignition sequences, improved fuel flow, better thermal management, and it showed. At T+210, the moment everyone was waiting for. Most engines cut off, MECO in SpaceX terminology. Only 3 center engines kept burning on the booster, while Starship's 6 Raptors prepared to take over. This is where physics gets violent. The booster shuts down 30 engines in seconds. Starship ignites 6 more while still attached. The forces involved would rip apart most structures. But at T+252, it happened flawlessly. Stage separation. Clean. Controlled. Beautiful. The booster flipped away in what SpaceX called their first directional flip, like a gymnast dismounting from parallel bars. But this graceful dance was hiding a deadly secret. Here's what the mainstream media missed. That booster wasn't supposed to land safely. It was on a kamikaze mission. At T+311, boost back burn initiated, 13 engines firing in perfect formation. But instead of a gentle descent profile, SpaceX programmed something radical, a higher angle of attack re-entry, more aggressive than any previous attempt. They wanted to break it. The goal wasn't recovery, it was data collection under extreme stress. How much heat can the grid fins handle? At what angle do control surfaces lose authority? When does structural failure cascade? These questions can't be answered in computer simulations. They require real metal, real heat, real destruction. At T+543, the landing burn sequence began. 13 engines relit for the final time. The booster screamed through the Gulf of Mexico atmosphere at angles that would terrify any pilot. Then, telemetry loss. The booster had given its life for science. But in those final moments, it transmitted thousands of data points, temperature readings from surfaces never before exposed to such heat, pressure measurements from control systems pushed beyond their limits. Every sensor reading was worth millions in development costs. The booster's death was more valuable than its survival. Meanwhile, Starship continued its climb to space. 6 engines burning perfectly, 3 sea-level Raptors and 3 vacuum-optimized variants. The vacuum engines are engineering marvels. Nozzles so large they can't fire at sea level without destroying themselves. But in the thin air of high altitude, they become the most efficient engines ever built. At T+816, terminal guidance was called. The engines began their carefully choreographed shutdown sequence, one by one, like a symphony reaching its crescendo. By T plus 9:04, complete engine cutoff, Starship was now in space. This is where things get interesting. At T plus 9:18, the payload bay door was supposed to open. This isn't just any door. It's a precision mechanism designed to deploy satellites worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The tolerances are measured in micrometers. But space is unforgiving. The temperature differential between the sunlit and shadowed sides of the vehicle creates thermal expansion that can jam mechanisms. The vacuum of space can cause lubricants to outgas, leaving moving parts stuck. "I'm sorry, Dan, I can't do that." That voice from Mission Control wasn't just announcing a failure. It was confirming one of SpaceX's biggest fears. What happens when critical systems fail? 140 million miles from Earth? At T plus 1030, disaster struck. Starship began to spin. In space, there's no air resistance to naturally stabilize a tumbling object. Once you start spinning, you keep spinning, faster and faster. The reaction control thrusters, tiny engines designed to maintain attitude, couldn't compensate. Either they malfunctioned or the spin rate exceeded their authority. Without attitude control, the planned Raptor relight was impossible. No relight meant no orbital capability demonstration. The mission was officially off script. But SpaceX's response was remarkable. Instead of panic, they shifted to contingency mode, maximum data collection from an uncontrolled reentry. They were about to get data money can't buy. As Starship's signal faded and the vehicle disintegrated over the Indian Ocean, something remarkable had happened. In just 47 minutes, this failed mission had achieved the impossible. Perfect engine ignition, 33 out of 33, flawless hot staging under the most extreme conditions, critical re-entry data that no computer simulation could provide, payload systems tested under real space conditions, booster recovery pushed to absolute limits. Each failure was actually a breakthrough in disguise. The data from Flight 9 will directly influence Flight 10, which will influence Flight 11, and so on. It's like building a pyramid of knowledge, where each destroyed vehicle becomes the foundation for the next breakthrough. But here's the biggest revelation. Every lesson learned from Flight 9's destruction directly applies to Mars survival. The spin control issues? That's exactly what could happen during Mars' atmospheric entry. The heat shield degradation? Mars has dust storms that could damage protective surfaces. The payload door failure? On Mars, that door might be the only thing standing between astronauts and death. SpaceX isn't just building rockets. They're building a survival manual for humanity's next home, written in fire and failure, and the courage to keep trying. But the most shocking truth is still coming. So here's what we just witnessed. SpaceX didn't lose a rocket. They gained a roadmap to Mars. Every explosion, every system failure, every terrifying moment of Flight 9 was actually a masterclass in controlled learning. 47 minutes of failure just saved future Mars crews from catastrophic unknowns. That's not reckless engineering, that's genius. But here's the question that's keeping me up at night. If SpaceX is willing to destroy billion-dollar rockets for data, what are they not telling us about their Mars timeline? Because something tells me we're closer to Mars than anyone realizes. What do you think? Are we watching the birth of humanity's next chapter, or just expensive fireworks? Drop your thoughts below. And if you're as obsessed with space engineering as we are here at Space Corps, hit that subscribe button, because Flight 10 is coming soon, and after what we just learned, it's going to be wild. The future is being written in fire, and we're here to decode every flame. Flight 9 exploded. But here's the crazy twist. The FAA's reaction was absolutely shocking. While $3 billion scattered across 2 oceans, Elon just announced Flight 10 launches in only 3 weeks. This total disaster, it's actually SpaceX's biggest breakthrough yet. Let's dive right in. So here's what actually happened on May 27th, and why it's driving everyone absolutely crazy. At exactly 1,600 nautical miles of cleared airspace, Super Heavy Booster 14 was climbing with the raw power of 16 million pounds of thrust. That's like strapping 32 Boeing 747 engines together and lighting them all at once. The monster rocket was carrying Ship 35 toward the Florida Straits when suddenly, boom! The $3 billion machine disintegrated over the Gulf of Mexico. Ship 35 followed suit, breaking apart at 59 kilometers above the Indian Ocean. People across Africa filmed what looked like a meteor streaking across their sky. Total mission failure, right?